Alright, time for another draftphysics.com, debatephysics.com also. Video presentation. Yeah, everything seems to be working. Alright, tolerably, acceptably. Anyway, alright, so there's 3 comments by some Karen in this blah 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 9921. No content on his own channel. It just seems strange that he would types all about the same amount on each video that he typed on. Now, it's nice that he's interested and he's playing along, but it's just all this mush about rationalizing bullshit. And I mean, I've made the explanation so simple that, come on. It's just bullshit. Okay? It really isn't that complicated, and there's nothing, I would argue, that's even incomplete in the explanation I have provided. That light's a little weird, but it'll have to do. So I've explained the charge is a really simple thing. I mean, electrons and protons have a real dimensional size. They're not point particles or infinitesimals or any of that crap. They're physical things in the universe, all right? And the simple argument is they know these physical things have these physical interactions. That is, 2 protons, let's say, repel each other very strongly. And electrons do the same thing, but somehow we're not supposed to talk about electrons being close together. Somehow it's a phenomenon when protons are close together, but not when electrons are. Now that's because they, claim the proton is much more massive, and I would claim it's probably true that it's more massive. It moves. You need more energy to move one, and that's why protons are in nucleuses and electrons are in both, the outside of an atom and the inside. But I mean, look, the simple argument is, okay, so they're making this argument, there's too much force here. These hate each other. Proton hates proton so fucking much that they could never get anywhere near each other. You need a billion megawatts of force to bring them close together. All of that jargon. Okay, and it's just jargon in my opinion, just words. I mean, obviously, yes, charge means they repel like magnets, but it's a finite amount of repulsion. It's not an infinite amount of repulsion. But anyway, look, the simple argument is we know protons are very attracted to electrons. So if we just put the other proton here, haven't we solved the problem of being close together? I mean, if you thought of these as magnetic monopoles, wouldn't this solve the problem if you could put a north magnet here and you had a south magnet and a south magnet? Now, the south magnets can't get anywhere near each other, but if I put a north magnet right in front of them, right in between them, you'd say, yeah, well, it's not going to be any problem. The proton is going to move right over here, and this proton is going to be right over here, and they're just going to be an electron away from each other. So you don't need a strong force to make protons get close to each other. You don't need some special new thing in the universe to push on the protons and push the protons into each other. You don't need an extra new force. You just need the existing mechanism and just arrange it. So I'm just saying, if I gave this to a physicist, I say, look, I make this in the universe. Proton, electron, proton. Explain to me where I need a strong force. They're not going to have any explanation because you don't need a strong force, obviously. So, I mean, it's so damn simple. And, I mean, all it takes is that they just won't imagine the universe that actually exists. They can't imagine one where, well, protons don't have any spatial dimension. I mean, yeah, they have a mass, but they don't exist. That kind of nonsense. I mean, it's just so fucking stupid. Alright, and so then this, asshole, has to, instead of just saying, yeah, you're right, they haven't really thought about it very much, have they? Something reasonable. It's this crap. Okay, I always thought the neutron is there to mediate the strong force in a way to prevent the repulsion of the protons. Yeah, that's what uselessness. It's only because they never said, well, what if an electron is between the 2 protons? They just never bother with that model, because as soon as you do that, you say, Oh yeah, there's no need for a strong force. Protons can get really close to each other as long as there's an electron between them. Also, if you forget that, I didn't forget anything. Fuck you, and fuck you. Okay. Who are you anyway? These people with these anonymous channels talking like they're authoritized, and I have to give a shit what you think, fucktard. How have you established that you spent any time analyzing anything? Alright, anyway. Also, you forget the fact that neutrons can't be just a proton and electron due to something I can't find the name, but the formation of deuterium occurs when two protons are combined, forming an unstable helium nucleus that will decay by the attraction of the protons to the electrons, creating a neutron. So how does what I say any different than that? Wait, in a way it kind of are the same. Yeah, that's right, fucktard. Oh, god damn it. So that whole pile of shit, also you forget, and then you end, oh yeah, maybe you didn't forget. So why don't you not bother typing that? Alright, the weak force is still a key to some of this as a meteor of decay. So again, there is no weak force. There's just force in the universe. One force, okay? It's just stuff moving the speed of light. And it can be electron force or proton force. Just like there's only one kind of matter. Okay, little material object. And it can be either a positive, that is a proton, or an electron. Fucking jack. Anyway. Decay, but in some ways a neutron really is just a proton and an electron. No, in all ways I would argue it is. And the difference is the stability of that mechanism is dependent on it not being free. Because in free space it's going to start to rotate. That is, the electron is going to be getting hit by energy causing effects. The proton gets hit by energy causing effects. And the two of them are going to have momentums that aren't going to be the same. And so it's going to shear and tear it apart. But when it's inside a nucleus and they're all arranged together, there's strength in numbers. Have you heard that phrase before? Strength in numbers. So as you increase the numbers, it gets harder and harder to break them apart. So you could say the same thing about magnets. If I put a bunch of north and south poles together and arrange them, that unit becomes a lot harder to break a piece off of than if I had just a single positive north-south magnet. But the fact that the neutrons decay outside a nucleus is a key, fuck you, understanding the strong force. It's just too fucking silly. You can't understand it. It's a magical, non-existent, non-described pile of shit nonsense that just says there is some special force that is in play when two protons get this close together. All of a sudden, the super force shows up and pushes them together. The force that has no source, it has no reality. It didn't exist before. It doesn't exist after. You don't have to conserve it. It's just magic force. The magic thing shows up. Just like gravity is a magic thing that just happens. The bent geodesic just magically causes. That's a good enough answer for you? Oh, God, shit. Ugh, Mew. Now he's going to talk about mesons. The mesons are bullshit, okay? Mesons are just... obviously, it's high velocity material objects, that is electrons and protons. So mesons are either two electrons, a proton and an electron, who knows exactly what it is, and you beat the crap out of it until you knock it to pieces. But it just is it's matter with energy. Alright, with motion. As mesons are produced upon the right decay that allows an intermediate. So why don't you show me the experimental evidence of that? Okay, that this meson thing, you know how they're produced. To be created as a neutron becomes a proton and another neutron is created. I don't even want to bother dissecting it. The magic thing falls apart and then a new magic thing is created. But then again, there is actually little difference in the two understandings, mainstream physics and the idea you say, making them both equally possible. So fuck you. There's only a gigantic, huge difference. One of them is dirt simple. The other one has a bunch of magical forces of no origin, of no substance, of no mechanical function. They couldn't be more different. It's like saying a Maserati is the same as Fred Flintstone's rock car. Fuck you! And you'll need different experimental evidence to disprove one or the other. So again, it's all one. There's one pool of evidence. You're saying you have a piece of evidence somewhere. I'm saying quite obviously all you have is interpretations of evidence. All right, so none of the experiments are inconsistent with what I'm saying. You're not going to show me an experiment where I can't point out exactly what I just said and explain how, yeah, that's perfectly fits with what I just said. So fuck you again. I'm not a physicist. No, you're an arrogant, pontificating douchebag troll who doesn't have any content on their channel, takes no responsibility or accountability, and just pontificates. You know, without anything to define yourself as having any, why should I give a fuck about what you have to say? Okay. I don't really know any experiments you could do to prove or disprove. Why should I have to even do any fucking experiments? These theories have been around for decades, if not hundreds of years, and you don't think this physics that has trillions of dollars essentially, you know, just piss away on bullshit, can't do experiments? You know, the only ones they do are the impossible ones. Let's go find the neutrino, which, you know, doesn't really exist. It's just a mathematical piece of residue. All right. Fuck you. Oh, he's going to talk about neutrinos. Prove or disprove this, but neutrinos come to mind. Yeah, why? Where do you have any evidence a neutrino exists? Any physical experimental evidence demonstrating the existence of this phantom particle? All you have is some speculation that, well, mv squared says it has 5 zillion joules of energy, so if I believe in the mv squared, I have to believe that there is a whole bunch of energy that escapes somewhere. So this is like finding the energy when the ballistic pendulum absorbs the momentum of the bullet, and you lose 99.94% of the kinetic energy. What are you going to say? It's neutrinos, of course. Well, yeah, okay, you can't find it as heat, you can't find it as movement, you can't find it as noise, you can't find it as vibration, you can't find it as anything normal, so it must be in the form of neutrinos. Fuck you. Come to mind, but then again, they're very hard to detect. They're impossible to detect because they don't exist. They're just mathematical error. The only forces that certainly exist are electromagnetism. So they're not separate forces. There's only force and matter. All right, electromagnetism is just charge. Gravity and the weak force isn't any such thing. Okay. Due to the existence of decay. Decay isn't that complicated, right? The only stuff that decays is usually stuff that contains too many pieces, okay, or an imbalance in pieces, and you can understand how it's more vulnerable. But clearly, there's only 100 arrangements of electrons and protons that are at all survivable, right? And we could argue that only 80 of them or so on the periodic table can survive. So clearly, most arrangements of electrons and protons decay. It doesn't work. It isn't stable enough. It's not complicated. Electron and proton attraction and gravity has to exist for anything to become so big. So, I don't even know what you're talking about. Anything. We know that the limitation to size has to do with the limitations of pressure. That there's a point where the pressure inside an object becomes too great and the little bits are in fact crushed too close to each other, and the repelling force is too strong and the object explodes. The strong force, however, seems like the hardest to prove. There's no reason to prove it, and it's perfectly understandable that there's no reason to think it's harder to push protons together than it is to push electrons together. So why don't we have a strong force pushing electrons together? See, it just doesn't make any sense. You don't need it. And if you're going to invent these fake forces, well, that's what physics has done, right? So now it has 400 different varieties of crap existing in the universe when, if you go to model an atom, all you really have to model are the electrons and protons. I mean, none of the people are doing in chemistry, and what people are doing in chemistry and what they do in biology doesn't have a damn thing to do with any of these 400 magical particles. Also, where'd you come up with the theory? Did you come up with it on your own, or was it because of people in the past having this theory? I mean, I'm sorry, but there's some of this research you should do on your own. Okay, the channel has thousands of videos and a 10-year history, and it just seems kind of funny that none of that you figured out. That, yeah, that if it was somebody else's theory, then I would just link to their theory. I just say, go watch this video. Fuckhead. Alright, so this one is a Neil deGrasse Tyson video. Okay, your physics lies about Newton. Okay, so that's basically just going to be this might be a kinetic energy argument, but we'll see. Alright, I feel like you may be wrong with some things, but I do agree that Neil deGrasse Tyson often does stupid things. Well, he's a clown. He doesn't just do stupid things. It's all clowning to an audience of morons. He may be an alright physicist. I don't even know why you think that. But he does speak about things like history in such a wrong ways that I absolutely hate how he depicts people in the past as often as idiots because they lacked certain equipment to give a better understanding. Regardless, I mean, this, his whole concept of the double slit experiment is such a bunch of mythology. I mean, he has no understanding of the actual simplicity of the experiment and the simplicity of the pattern created. Also, isn't energy a thing since it also isn't energy a thing? So this is just too silly a statement, right? The argument isn't about the existence of energy, it's about the definition of energy. Since of the particles that transfer the fundamental forces. So what does that even mean? The force is the energy. Force moves at the speed of light. It has a lot of velocity. It gives velocity to matter, therefore losing its energy to the matter, essentially. I agree with you that Neil is being completely wrong. Infrared light is the main wavelength, so I don't even know what that even means. I mean, it just, the main wavelength, there's a main wavelength of electromagnetic waves, says you, that transfers heat via radiation of the particles. Alright, so the whole theory is pointing out how nothing radiates anything. Everything just reflects the universe that's imposing on it. So in one way or another, it either has stored energy, that is, energy that went in and never came out, and then later it gives it back, or it just bounces off. Okay, it goes in, comes back out again. But nothing, in a sense, produces anything. It all is dependent on some force, okay, being stored and released, being reflected eventually. Being reflected quickly or being reflected slowly. Alright, the other way energy is transferred is by kinetic energy, which produces friction, which causes the atoms to vibrate faster. So this is more nonsense about some sort of friction. There's no friction in space, for example. And there's certainly the whole idea of infrared photon transfers of energy don't require anything called friction. And the faster vibrations means more energy, meaning things are warmer. So just more baby talk, frankly. I feel like Neil completely ignored all the laws of thermodynamics in this explanation. If you ignore the laws of energy, well, yeah, it's pretty easy to say it's not real. So there's more blah, blah, blah. Energy can be transferred. That's all that's happening in the universe. Nothing happens in the universe unless the force interacts with matter. If it doesn't interact with matter, the universe doesn't do anything. Mass is something to do with gravity. Hilarious. So gravity is the primary thing, and the mass is, again, the secondary thing. Now, the mass is just the gravity collector. okay, which ties themselves together, allowing for gravitational potential energy. So again, there's no potential energy. If there's a boat on the side of the Mississippi River, you don't say, the boat has a bunch of potential energy. No, you got to put it in the river. The river's the source of the energy. The boat doesn't have shit. Okay, God, people. It sounds like Neil is breaking also Einstein's laws. E equals mc squared. Some more blah, blah, you know. I mean, it's just more just nonsense. He's just quantifying an amount of energy. Do you really think the universe is so clever that it's decided that energy has something to do with the speed of light when, it's just an arbitrary speed? I could double it, and if everything else was doubled, you wouldn't notice any difference. It's pretty important to the version of physics he follows, and whatever that means. Energy and mass are equal to c squared. So I'm sorry, you're just wasting your time thinking that simplification is an answer to the Planck unit of energy in the universe, because it really isn't. There's a certain amount. If I could just take a hunk of space, a little sphere of space. In that space, at any one moment, there's a certain amount of force traveling through it. Okay, now it's probably some preposterously huge number, like mc squared, but you don't need a mass. Okay, the mass just means space. So it really doesn't have anything to do with the space. It just has to, the mass, it just has to do with the space the mass occupies. How much sun hits something depends on how big it is. Well, the same is sort of true for these forces. These forces are hitting objects based on their real dimensions. Okay, they can't hit it if it doesn't have a dimensional size. All right, the constant being something, I don't know, but it's stupid to argue against your own version. I don't even know. Whatever. He doesn't have a version. The point is none of this stuff is proven and none of it's demonstrated by evidence. It's all just their perverse interpretation of evidence. Again, they do the Stern-Gerlach experiment where they're shooting silver atoms through a magnetic field, and then they start talking about which way an electron was spinning, as if they detected something called an electron spin. No, they didn't. They detected what a silver ion does. We know something is wrong either in the Standard Model or Einstein, because both fail to explain gravity at a quantum value. Both theories don't have anything to do with reality. That's the problem, that you don't have absolute space with the relativity theory, which is absolute nonsense, because things have to travel absolute distances in real things, and that's what energy is, and space isn't bent and warped. And then the other side is their quantum thing certainly can't deal with the fact that they're saying the particles they have a mass, but they have no reality. They have momentum, but they don't have any mass. How can they do that? They can't do that. So they have this notion of a photon as this momentum imposer, and yet it doesn't have any mass. Why? Why doesn't it have any mass? Who made that decision? Who decided it doesn't have any mass? Seems a ridiculous statement. Something can transfer momentum and yet it doesn't have any mass. Doesn't mean anything. Doesn't make any fucking sense at all. I don't think Newton does that either. I think Newton makes it pretty clear. Twice the force, twice the velocity. But there must be another version where parts of each are correct. And for Neil to think we have it right is just ego showing. So again, to think you can make the argument from zero evidence is the real problem, and a model that's incomplete. That is, you can't draw it. So I can draw you, and I have done it, okay, how it works. You're saying that I have to keep draw some more because somehow I don't have it. Well, I think I have it. It works. Okay, I've made a simulation showing it working. So, fuck you. You're not counter-arguing. You're certainly not showing me any evidence to indicate anything I'm saying is wrong. Alright, so then this one is Sabine Hassenfelder wave particle nonsense. So clearly it's all just because they decided, okay, that this interference thing is some sort of real thing, okay? So because water physically interacts, it's matter against matter, and the matter physically interacts, and it can, in a sense, cancel, okay? Forces don't cancel. They never stop moving, so they never stop not being themselves, so they can never cancel. So for a force, you can't just do, well, I banged this way and I banged this way and 0 happened. I got 0. No, you're going to get, I went right and then I had to turn the wheel left again. Okay, you're going to do both things. There's not going to be any canceling. There's just going to be a counterbalance. I think wave particle duality is just a fancy way of saying that when it comes to the smallest things in the world, they can't be understood as we can understand things on a larger scale. No, so again, that are larger. So again, no, there's no problem drawing models. There's no problem making a model and saying, does the model work? That's all you need, is a working mechanical drawing of the properties that the things have, and then you put those properties in motion. But obviously nothing is waving. Laser beams prove it's nothing to do with a fucking wave. It's obviously discrete pieces of energy, and you can move them all in the same direction or you can scatter them. Due to this, they are in a constant flux of being in places because we can't see them, but when we do, we find the particles due to the oddity of the quantum world. So it's just a lie that you see them in any of the places they're predicting anyway. If you really analyze the double slit experiment, they've never seen a photon take the 90 degree, or 85 degree angle. Never seen one, never photographed one, never did anything. They haven't proven any of this wave shit, okay? And in these videos, I easily explain. Oh, we don't need the street noise. I have to get rid of that. People driving way too fast, way too early. Anyway, so this has nothing to do with this quantum crap, okay? Nothing is in a superposition. Nothing's in the same place. Forces do not interact with forces. They have to interact with matter. And the simple explanation for the double slit experiment is that all you're doing is taking photons and breaking their phase and then refixing their phase. You're taking the elemental pieces of a photon, changing their positions in space a little bit, taking them out of phase, so now they're not Morse code, they're not dot dash dot dash. Their spatial relationship is no longer a consistent frequency, therefore they can't tip over the obelisk. The energy has to go in at just the right frequency to tip it over. If it's not that frequency, it won't tip it over. It's that simple an argument I've made millions of times now, and fuck you. It's more just because how we truly can't see well inside these regions without using charged particles that mess with it. Now, that's quite obviously true, that we can't take a videotape of any of this stuff, but you can certainly draw it out. You can know that there's certain truths about what's happening when you shoot photons through slits. You can find out that, oh yeah, it's really just about the distance between the surfaces. So essentially the surfaces are just becoming point sources. They're just becoming a new source of photons, essentially. And if you analyze it that simply, you can understand why they're in phase and out of phase based on the distance. So the outside surfaces are creating the little pattern, and the inside, the smallest distance between two surfaces, are creating the envelope pattern. And it's quite obvious and mathematically perfect, so why there shouldn't be any contradiction or conflict. It's a simple thing to understand that the surfaces are covered in electrons, the photons hit the electrons, the photons energy now has a new vector or direction because it interacted with matter. Maybe if we could use neutrinos, oh fuck you, again, there's complete no evidence for the existence of these stupid neutrinos. We'd work this out better. Oh, you people just make me want to vomit. also, sound is a better example of waves along with water. So again, they're examples of matter moving, okay? Not fucking speed of light photons. They're not the same thing. There should be no expectation that they behave the same way. One is completely made out of stuff called force. The other ones are made out of stuff called matter, atoms moving. Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. The way that fluids and gases, when distorted by vibrations, form areas of lower and higher pressure creates a wave can be detect as sound, and then the other one is light, which the wave thing is harder to explain, and particles can kind of be explained by saying it's the size of the wave teeth. What? Is actually something with the radius. Look, they have no idea what a photon is, right? They have an irrational explanation. They think it's a thing, an object of some kind. And then in the case of like radio waves, an object that is miles in dimension. What a pile of shit. It's just a frequency. That's all it is. It's a frequency, an event frequency, a period between events. The energy shows up based on a timed cycle. And that time cycle is essential to being able to vibrate or move the electrons within atoms. Each atom has a different sensitivity to a different frequency, a resident frequency, because it has a dimension. Forces create odd kind of fields around them that cause light and gravity and such in a way that's hard to explain. Then fuck you. Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. You just type this shit. You have no evidence. You have no theory. You have no model. You have no simulation. You have no nothing. You're just talking out of your ass. Oh, fuck you. Wait. Your joking answer kind of sounds like it could be the way to explain this duality. Oh, the photon is a particle, so fuck you, that creates electromagnetic waves like how a magnet makes invisible magnetic. So you think a magnet is waving something? I mean, it couldn't be more, obvious, the monopole nature of it. I mean, you're taking two opposite charges and essentially putting them on top of each other, and it behaves exactly as an electrical charge that's a dipole would behave. That we can see with a compass. So when we observe the particles, we can see it because it's easier to see than the waves it makes, as well it itself emits the light waves far more than the waves around it do themselves. I don't know with any of that crap. But again, just this shit talk. Fuck you. Oh. I mean, you're just making this crap up. You're not doing science a favor. You're not doing anything a favor. This kind of just lazy blah blah. Just make up some crap based on my limited information. Then the same kind of idea could be applied to electrons and protons and neutrons and gravity, and kind of makes the most sense. Not sure how you'd prove it. So again, all you have to do to prove something is to show its consistency with known facts. And the experiments produce the known facts. So I'm just saying there's clearly the experiments done with the double slit, for example, don't demonstrate what they claim it demonstrates. Okay, their math doesn't even work if you use anything other than the distance between the surfaces as the and understand them as point sources. It's not about an opening. It's about a distance between surfaces. Not sure how you'd prove it, because most of the quantum physics is created through this kind of we can't know if the cat is dead or alive. So you actually fall for that crap. You actually think that there's some part of the universe that isn't tested every millisecond by something like gravity. I mean, there can be no superposition, no confused states if there's a force interacting with something. So when the cat's in the box, gravity is still interacting with it. It's essentially analyzing it, measuring it every millisecond. So there is no state where there's any confusion. All right. Despite the fact that cat observes itself die, and I'm sure anything alive has a limited amount of ability to observe, making parts of quantum physics only work in a vacuum of space. So, just fuck you. I mean, the fact that you're interested enough to sit there and type all this crap, and you're just wasting your time, okay, because you're not providing any clarity. You're not proving their theory, and you're not disproving mine. You're not arguing their theory and showing how mine has a limitation. You're just sitting there making excuses. Well, maybe this, and maybe that, and maybe could, and maybe. Just crap. It's just useless. I mean, every one of these videos has a clear assertion. Wave, particle. Bullshit. It's all particles. Okay, it's the assertion. Particles work just fine in explaining all the phenomenon. Okay, there is no wave phenomenon. Waves are emergent. Waves are not elemental. Nothing elementally waves. All right. And then energy is clearly, there's no such thing as 1/2 mv squared. It's a fable. It's nonsense. It's just absolute bullshit. And then gravity's a real force, and the forces are real, and there is no strong force, there is no weak force, there's just charge. There's electrons and protons, and the force they have to interact with. And that's all there is. It's all the same stuff in the sense that magnetism is just what happens when you make charged dipoles. When you make a charged dipole, an electron and proton, a dipole, you've made a magnet. Fuck. God, I just hate this planet. Alright, so anyway. Call it a video. Comments are just I guess I could do this. I don't think I actually read this one. I mean, I responded to it in the sense I did the other video, which basically went over this very same concept. Let's say the equation for work. So let's just, why don't you just, point out the equation for work says distance matters. It doesn't give a shit about time. So it says that work equals force times distance. Right. Was written as an integral, and the spring's mass was the same mass as the object. Well, obviously then the springs would use up the same amount of energy that they're supposed to be giving to the object. So obviously the spring wouldn't be of much value pushing something with an amount of force only able to move the spring. So any force that would move the object would actually have to be twice the force, because you have to move twice the mass. Could you use the equation for work? So why would I use a wrong equation? To develop a new quantum equation for force. Develop a new equation for force. Why? I don't need to develop one. It already exists. Okay? Force times time. Time. Always works. Force times time always gets the right answer. At which point would someone want the spring's mass to be the same as the object to do less work and apply more force? So I don't even know what you're talking about there, because obviously there's no free energy accessible. There's always either some inefficiency in a process that takes the energy. I mean, the very fact that a spring storage it can't release all of the energy the spring absorbs, because it causes motion in the spring, and the motion in the spring is not going to be perfectly matched to the motion of the object, and therefore the spring is always going to have something left over. It's always going to do this when it's done, indicating it didn't give away all the energy. Alright, so I did go over that in the other video. Alright, so enough. Fuck. So anyway, till next time. It's just pointless, right? I mean, I have, in the 10 years I've provided these sound, nice arguments explaining how there's very simple explanations. The physics can be dirt simple. So fucking simple. And people just don't want to hear the simple answer. They want to cling to the wooey bullshit, special kind of space, special forces, special bullshit kind of explanation. The truth doesn't mean anything. It's just about what's fun to believe. More fun. Tell people. Truth